An Anniversary by Walter de la Mare. At least a minute, and one that resembles not only a sort of hole in time, but a pause in eternity, must have ticked its moments away. But even yet Aubrey could not be positively certain of what he had seen. Of the after-effects of just that one transfixed, vague glimpse, his present attitude, long-chinned face thrust forward, cold, grey, light-lashed eyes peering fixedly through the budding tresses of his contorted weeping ash, was evidence enough. His earthenware pitcher still dangled from his numbed fingers. The blood in his throat and temples continued its faint drumming, and was the cause, perhaps, of the peculiar descending shimmer, as of motes of light, that now affected his vision. His eyes themselves, it seemed, had refused to let him make sure. He had been abjectly shaken, momentarily terrified even. The scalp on his head was still tingling, and yet he had continued to think. He had made a habit of attending to what happened in his mind, and was well aware that unpleasing memories, if they are steadily suppressed and driven down into the dark of that mind, may yet somehow grope to the surface again and reappear in unexpected disguises, especially when one is not watching out for them. What then of this particular memory? For a whole year it had stationed itself like a skulking, menacing shadow on the outskirts of consciousness. With anything so habitual, one does not even have to look to see if it is still there. Just as in one's own house, at the end perhaps of a corridor, or on the landing of a staircase, may hang a portrait which appears as if what it represented were always steadily in wait for a renewed and really close scrutiny of itself. And even though faces in portraits are only made of paint on canvas, they can yet shed on one a sort of passive influence. The inward shade that frequented Aubrey's mind was not, however, a mere portrait. It was the vivid mental image of a friend whom he had sufficient reason to distrust and even detest, although its original must long ago, surely, have given up all earthly or any other concern with him, or with Emily either. The bourne from which, please God, no traveller returns. It had needed no Shakespeare to discover that. Why then, quite unexpectedly, not out of the blue perhaps, but out of these cold evening shadows, had... That was the question, a fantastic yet rather pressing question. What neglect there had been up to the present had, it is true, been on one side only, the friend's, not on Aubrey's, and he believed that he knew all that he needed to know of Emily. When two minds, a man's and a woman's, are in close and frequent association with one another, or two bodies for that matter, each, it seems, may be silently aware even of what may be secretly passing in the others. They seem to play eavesdropper, not only to one another's thoughts, but even sensations. But then women are assumed to be more sentimental than men. More sentimental, at any rate, than Aubrey was himself by nature, or than he had any intention of being. Over anniversaries, for example, birthdays, wedding days, red letter days, promise days, love days, Mother's days, death days. It was fantastic. It was as if their hearts were their calendars, dismally trustworthy calendars in the clearest of print. To let the dead past bury not only its dead, but also its moribund, and bury it deep, had always been, by much, Aubrey's private preference. And what of that sinister and secretive evil jealousy, which may rot into a wearisome and corrosive hatred? Hack away as you will at its roots and suckers, they will begin sprouting again even in the small hours of a single night. They become entangled with the instincts, and are the hops and brambles and bindweed of the imagination. Trailing, tender, almond-scented bindweed, Aubrey had read somewhere, will penetrate into loamy churchyard sod and soil a sheer 9 feet, full fathom 5, but that he should have fallen a prey to jealousy, and with nothing but envy and a worn-out passion, no affection even, for its justification. Apart from many reasons, however, and hatred no more than love positively needs any, he had at first sight taken a sudden hatred to John Fiske. In the whole wide world he was certain there was nothing they could ever have agreed about. Oil and vinegar, yes, but here there had been no salad. One can sneer at, despise, and label an enemy stupid and stolid too, and yet realize that it would be nearer the mark if in the latter epithet one omitted the T. In spite of his cursed honesty, his stubborn directness, and unshakable devotion to what did not belong to him, John Fiske had been as hard to see through as he had been to explore. More impenetrable, indeed, even than the gloom now steadily deepening beneath the branches of this weeping ash. Besides, Aubrey had been envious of Fiske long before he had become jealous of him. Not because he thought him as quick and clever, and certainly not as attractive, as himself. It was his dull, suety, habitually good qualities that he abominated most. They can be the very devil when one wants the owner of them out of the way. As for his own good qualities, brains, morals, heart, he'd have given himself a plus for the first, and the rest, well, according to taste. Also, he knew what he wanted. As, of course, in his slow, honest-to-God nauseating fashion, had Fiske. Precisely how much of his own particular want had he got? By no means all. Aubrey himself had seen to that. And yet, to hell with him. There, indeed, so far as undertaker, sexton, and the passing of time can manage, was precisely where he might perhaps be now, and for good. Though, somehow, the clever seemed to be its likelier inhabitants. Why on earth, then, was he himself dithering about like this, outside this arboreal cage, and extremely reluctant to venture into it? Solely because it had for that split second seemed to be occupied, and by a vigilant and tongueless intruder loafing in wait by a damp-greened old water-butt, his clock a dripping tap. Aubrey's first symptoms of shock having now subsided, one simple question presented itself. Since what he had seen, or had appeared to see, could by no possibility be actual, not at any rate as actual as the water-butt, could it have been real? If real, it would prove a deadly nuisance, and might entail the vilest complications. If not real, it had been merely an illusion. Ghosts. Pah! No, from that bourne no traveller returns, and that may be damned bad luck for those beyond it. Dead men rise up never, no matter into what dead sea even the wariest river may eventually wind its way. Apart from their bones and their worldly chattels, the only thing the dead leave behind them is their memory. But that, such is the imbecility of the human mind, however anxiously it is hidden, may, as Emily would agree, become an obsession, and obsessions may breed illusions. With them, bell, book, and candle are of far less service than potassium bromide. A sneer webbed over Aubrey's cold, stiff features. For with Emily, even potassium bromide, let alone her evening services, tame cattiness, and deadly taciturnity, had failed. Real or not, it was just like Fiske to have chosen this particular place and time for, well, this reunion. During the lingering days of autumn, how often at his work in the city used Aubrey's fascinated fancy to turn to this last half-hour of twilight in his long straggling garden, these motionless, misty, earthly early October evenings, the last of the sunset withering in the west. He loved the reek of his leaf bonfires and its haunting nutty odor of decay. He loved being alone, or rather, perhaps, being in strict privacy. And here, even at noonday, his garden was screened from the direct scrutiny of his neighbors. He was a person who refused not only to allow himself to be neglected, but also to be overlooked. But there are eyes that, once met, cannot even in memory be disregarded. Apart from direct access by way of the house, the only route into and out of Aubrey's garden lay through a wicket gate that led into the open, into wide, flat, and now mist-bound fields of damp and malodorous cabbages and cauliflowers, sour acres and acres of deserted market gardens. Yet, back from his day in London, he delighted in pottering, and hardly less in pretending to potter. A perpetual and pleasing activity of mind usually accompanied this busy Doolittle. He was abnormally secretive. For weeks he had held his tongue, while that little romance of yesteryear had steadily intensified, and in his own particular little intentions and designs had no less steadily matured. And even this, no doubt, was in part because of his peculiar pleasure in his own society, even at its worst. He especially enjoyed a festering, stagnant mood. Not that many human beings are not pleasanter when they are alone. It is an eventuality that may be of equal advantage to their friends. Indeed, who would deny that it is chiefly the presence of one's fellow creatures that evokes one's worst, though these may possibly be one's rarest, characteristics? Alone, even by no means virtuous people may mean wholly well. Not so Aubrey. He despised what he called cant. And, first and foremost, he meant business. It was, too, in the solitude of his garden, particularly as dusk thickened, that he could best explore his little plans. Then, as if with a dark lantern, he could follow up the wavering intersecting paths leading into the future. Digging, trenching, and even weeding helped him to concentrate. He was something of a sapper, too, sly and sedulous when things or people stood in his way. But why so thirsty a creature? He delighted in cold water especially, and drank large quantities of it. For one thing, it was all but free. For another, one's wet may be a trifle too dry. It was then a special pleasure, his gardening done for the day, to sally off down to the water-butt under his weeping ash, and there fill his earthenware pitcher. For himself, and for the flowers and pot plants indoors. It was due, perhaps, to the old Adam in him, after the fall of Eve. Also, he had a nice taste in flowers. One might almost describe him as an intellectual aesthete who, on his arrival into this unrighteous world, had been deprived of a suitable start. At this very moment, he stood listening. He could hear from under the tree the furtive falling sing-song of the water drops out of the pump's iron spout, a tuneless tune, either entirely heedless of its surroundings, or, contrariwise, endeavoring to warn him of something amiss. But what? Just lately, as the days drew in, it had been more than dusk. It had been all but dark, when he had abandoned his flower-beds. The first stars would be pricking into the sky. He would stand, looking up, amused to remind himself that these sparkling darlings of the poets and sentimentalists are nothing but remote and unimaginably immense vats of gas or energy, anything you please, except the pretty. That, beyond inconceivably icy Saharas of pitch-black space, they are not only at some appalling velocity hastening towards, or was it away from, man's silly little solar system, but are also running down. It was an anachronistic little notion that made him laugh. All of us, every one of us, doomed. What concern had they, indeed, with human affairs, these celestial glowworms, devoid even of harboring a consciousness? His own star was quite another matter. That was his concern, or, at any rate, he meant to make it so. And now, large as life, as reserved, as unfathomable, and, damn his eyes, as coldly contemptuous of Aubrey himself as ever, here was this devil, Fisk, or his double, or his revenant, his astral body, or mere presentment, masquerading in the shelter of Aubrey's very own private weeping ash. Come back, had he? What for? Whom for? Ah, yes. In that maze we call the mind, and heart too, even an illusion may have a purpose and a motive, though either may remain securely hidden in the unconscious. If this was solely his own illusion, and he himself was its only goal, well and good. But suppose Emily. No, he badly needed that there should be no meddling with her, not yet anyhow, and to confess to an illusion, to her. He realized that he was being compelled to pay attention to a mere trick of the senses, to a silly hallucination, which might nonetheless tend to become a habitual hallucination. With the advent of this abused notion, Aubrey suddenly changed his mind. A brilliant idea. Why not presently make mocking mention to Emily of this silly illusion, and watch her reactions? It would all sound so plausible, and so natural, and so harmless. Yes, darling, just now, as a matter of fact, having finished up, I was just going indoors to fill the water-pot when... There had been too much futile reserve and concealment during these last months, the first vindictive indictments and persecutions over, and before stagnancy had set in. Far better, perhaps, bring the whole stupid business into the open again. Yes, and keep it there. If his fancies intended to prey on him, they might in that case not have to prey for very long. Every female heart has its snapping point. The elastic perishes. What need then was there for worry? Solely and solidly, of course, because all this entailed a crucial little question of pounds, shillings, and pence. Ghosts, whatever their texture, may gibber, but money talks. And loudly, too, if one has the need or the desire to listen. Had Emily, or had she not, made another will? If she had, then, he could be practically certain of disaster, and for the life of him he could not conceive of any hiding-place as yet unattended to, not at least in the house. If she had not, well, better not inquire too closely. In any case, she had not forgotten. That covertly scrutinized telltale face, the lurking shadows, the hauntedness beneath those rounded eyelids, had never left it. Neither by day nor by night had it lost either its pallor or its settled melancholy. An abandoned Ophelia, suckling a secret so intense and so profound. Those long lapses, too, into silence and vacancy. Recently he had done his level best to let this particular sleeping dog lie, and in so doing, how much he had missed the amusing but now forbidden sport of stirring its maudlin slumbers. Passive resistance, passive acceptance, which was the most galling. He had begun to fancy, moreover, that slander, or intuition, had been busy with his own little activities. Supposing, then, that, after all, with her pestilent mother for accomplice, Emily was debating, still in doubt, whether or not to leave him. No guile, no subtlety, not even his own, could extort so much as a nod from her on that. Was she herself less candid, less transparent than he had supposed? Well, she had discovered long ago what kind of fish she had netted, or been netted by. Why, then, was he fudging and faltering like this? There had been a light rain that evening, gently weeping clouds, and only at this moment had he become aware that a newish moon was sinking in the west, a moon well on her way to her first quarter, faintly silvering the ash-twigs, vaguely adulterating the gloom within. How easily might his recent little experience have been a pure deceit! And yet, could the mere misconception of some familiar object have continued active for so long? How many moments, minutes, had he been caught up in this idiotic trance? Aubrey stooped a little, shut his eyes very tight for a few instants, then opened them again. Idiot! The effort had only made them less effective. Those scintillant, luminous motes poured softly on. At length, lifting his left hand, as gently as a Gehazi peering in upon an Elisha, he drew a fan of twigs an inch or two aside. Well, he heard his dry lips calling softly into the gloom. What about it, then? Is that you, Fisk? In the complete history of mankind, never, surely, had a more imbecile question been addressed into a silence so intent. Not a single syllable of this dramatic little adjuration had been consciously present in his mind until he had heard his own voice utter it. A queer voice, too, and no wonder. There, in every obscure detail, utterly motionless, mutely and tranquilly challenging, the illusion had taken shape again, or in the interval had remained unaffected. There was no active speculation in those eyes, nor assuredly anything approaching a glare. They were still faintly luminous and serenely inquiring, as if in some remote meditation. At this overwhelming proof of his beastly predicament, provoked too, perhaps, by the shaken and muffled tones of his own voice, and the effort to stop his teeth chattering, Aubrey's wits had become slightly unbalanced. He stooped lower, coughed. He was afraid. "Whoever you are, whatever you are," he heard his swollen tongue declare, "you have no bloody business to be here. Understand that. You! If you want me, or anybody else for that matter, you know where the gate is, and you can go round to the front. Do you hear me? Go round to the front, curse you, and knock like a gentleman." But had he in fact uttered these words, or had he only overheard one of those inward interlopers who begin so garrulously shouting into one's ears on the very brink of sleep? He had, at any rate, thought them, and the rebuke had done something to restore his confidence. He knew, oh, absolutely, that no answer would come. He defied an answer. Indeed, the only perceptible change in his surroundings, the faintest of changes, was that the deepening darkness into which he was peering had been very feebly diminished. As cautiously as an animal venomously resentful of its cage, he glanced over his shoulder. Well, he had bidden his visitor go round to the front and knock like a gentleman. And now, as if for a symbol of how warmly he would be welcomed, a light which must momentarily have shone out and down from an upper window of the house behind him had suddenly gone out. Its walls and windows, its whole presence now, blank again as a sepulchre's. This time, too, when he himself wheeled swiftly round again, there was absolutely nothing to be seen but his mute, own familiar pump beneath its writhen, wattled tent of intertwining ash boughs. And a silence had fallen, curdled only by that one tiny monotonous watery whimper, intent not only on repeating the same tune on and over again, but on singing it. God help him! Counterfeit or not, the black man had certainly taken shape, the shape of Fisk. And although Aubrey's lean, long-chinned face, his pale eyes and brass-colored hair hardly suggested that he was likely to be the victim of nerves, this precisely was what he was in danger of now. And for how long? He swallowed the hoarse laugh of bravado that had slid into his throat before it had become audible, and for yet another moment or two still hesitated to intrude from out of the open into the little tent of darkness that until this evening had been his all but unfailingly happy heritage as tenant of his garden. What the eye cannot see, the skin may become aware of. Still, go right in he did at last, and waited until his pitcher was 3 parts full, striving the while to breathe less quickly the dank autumnal air, and to slow up his silly heartbeats. He was alone now, acutely so. His visitor, his visitant, had absconded. But never, never again would his idolized garden be able to convince him that his solitude was absolute and complete. The mists from the rain-soaked flats beyond his wicket gate were now not only visible, but smellable and tasteable, whereas his late visitant, well, he could not say what precise conspiracy of his senses had been responsible for him. He had assuredly not been audible. So much for that, Aubrey muttered to himself, as he gave a violent wrench to the cold, water-wet tap in the hope of silencing its silly, officious, doll-like musical box. Now for the rest of the play. He even regretted that he had not reminded his meddlesome enemy that there was a notice board at the gate out of the market gardens proclaiming no admittance except on business. The faint tinkle of a bell sounded from the house behind him. He swore under his breath. That's just what these idiots would be doing at such a moment. and as yet he had no time for a wash or to change his gardening boots, clumpers half an inch thick with sodden soil. He took out his handkerchief and wiped his face and head. He was exhausted solely by the strain of standing motionless for perhaps 3 complete minutes. Or was it months? He must go in, and quickly. A cold, jagged smile broke over his features, supposing that a little while ago he had been taken at his word. A rat-a-tat-tat-tat. Qui vive? Who knows? And what then? Or had what happened in the solitude of the garden been only a novel and beastly symptom of one of his own familiar little attacks? Yet another bout, and as early as October. A glimpse of himself, feeble and sweating on a sick-bed, swam into his view. How much he loathed repeated parrot-like inquiries, and that evening tray laden with its tail-swallowed whiting, or insipid minced chicken, and miniature light pudding, or tapioca. That would be when he was getting better. Getting better, yes, but then you never knew. However, he was no weakling. He had schooled himself in the past to face what may come, and particularly if he had arranged for it. Dunning letters, for example, pleaful letters, indiscreet, passionate, aggrieved outpourings of the heart. Rate collectors, and now and then the money-lender's jackal. Just wait, and above all, keep calm. Think before you speak. Watch, and never, never, unless you are positively concerned, never lose your temper or your balance. Unless in the next world space is of no consequence, unless time is non-existent in eternity, it would take his revenant, his comeback, his spook, if not his hallucination, at least 10 minutes to get round from his garden gate to the front door. Why, he wondered, must the thought of a slow but sure walking apparition be so much less savory in the fancy than, say, the classic method devised for its reappearance by the usual medium? A fisc consisting of ectoplasm, and why was he himself still listening? The squeal of his front gate could be heard a mile off, but had he shut it? What the hell was the use of asking himself such fatuous questions? He pushed back his handkerchief into his pocket, lifted his pitcher of well water, twice as heavy as it had ever been before, trod steadily and stealthily back to the house, set it down on the stones in the back porch, opened the door, and went in. The fusty room beyond, although it contained his pet primulas and gloxinias, was scarcely worthy of being called a conservatory, and there was only darkness now to see his treasures by, so that when he opened the French window and pushed back the curtain that concealed the dining-room beyond, the instantaneous electric blaze for the instant all but blinded him. It was as sudden as a blow in the face. The room was vacant, but everything lay ready on the table and on the sideboard, flowers, china, silver, shining and twinkling there, mute and peaceful. Still life. He glanced at the clock on the chimney-piece, a wedding present. It at once began to tick. He went softly in, then out into the demure, scrupulously clean and garnished little hall beyond. Fingers and thumb on the newel of its post, he paused at the foot of the staircase. And, as if he had been heard listening, "Oh, is that you, Aubrey? Supper's ready," a voice called faintly from upstairs. "I am just coming. I was getting a handkerchief." "Right, darling," he shouted back, but louder than he had intended. "But don't come down. I am coming up. I must have a wash. I was kept in the garden. I could not get—" "Kept in the garden?" echoed the voice, a little nearer now, and even as if the owner of it were awaiting, even dreading, what so simple an explanation might mean, although he had carefully refrained from making it unusual by even a fraction of a syllable. "Don't come down," he repeated. "I am coming up. This moment." He paused to swallow. "Everything all right?" "Damn fool." "Oh, very well," came the answer, yet faintlier. "Yes, everything. I shall be in the bathroom. I am getting a hot water bottle." A hot water bottle, the old self-pampering, more invalidism, and doctor's bills, the old pains, he supposed. But surely she couldn't be going to bed. Clay, clay cold is my earthly mouth. How did that old borderland jingle go? Treading with an almost cat-like punctilio on the mats, from door to door, with two almost soundless intervening steps on the linoleum between them, he made his way into the kitchen. All that, for the moment, he could see of its only inmate was a hummock of black skirts, a strip of what appeared to be a petticoat, and exposed heels. The rest of her was concealed by the open door of the gas oven. "Mary," he cried softly, "don't dish up just yet. I am not ready. And—" A long, dark, and intent face had made its appearance above the oven door. "What I was going to say," he explained, "is that, well, there may be a visitor, and I don't want Mrs. Silcott to be worried just now. She seems to be overtired." Yet again he listened to an ejected statement that he could have taken his Bible oath he had never meant to make. Well, he must stick to it. The dark stare from above the oven door had intensified. Sullen rat! Who paid her wages? "A visitor, staying for supper?" "Yes. Oh, no, I didn't mean that. Only that if anyone should knock whom you may not recognize, don't necessarily ask him in. I see there is no light in the hall yet. I'll switch that on first. It may, of course, be nothing at all, merely a false alarm. I mean, of course, there's only a possibility. In the city this afternoon—" Why had a stolid, colorless face stirred not so much as an eyelid, merely stared? "I mean," he fumbled on, "if no one comes, it does not matter, obviously. There is no need to wait about, I mean, except not to dish up for the time being. But if anyone should, then just come to me and say, 'Mr. Hamilton wishes to see you. It's about a picture,' something of that kind. I am not suggesting, mind," and an all but winsome smile edged into his gray features, "that it will be a Mr. Hamilton, or about a picture. It might be somebody else. However, that will be all right. I shall understand. Do you see what I mean?" Mary abruptly turned her head away, paused, as it seemed, to exchange a few words with the interior of the oven, then rose to her feet. She then firmly shut to the oven door. She knew that she had been watching him more intently than was necessary while he had given his directions, his orders. But then you can never be sure what some people are up to. That rigmarole, and a face like a half-starved ferret. She looked at him again, point-blank, with her pitch-black, disciplined eyes, a bleak, plain, honest stare, and intelligent. "Very good, sir," she said. "You don't know whether or not. But if so, a Mr. Hamilton. I quite understand, but nobody extra. And whoever it is, I am to say a Mr. Hamilton. Mrs. Silcott is poorly again." "Ah," Aubrey answered the tone of her remark, not its meaning. "Yes, I am sorry." Yet again his rasp-edged temper had nearly got the better of him. Of what consequence was it what a servant thought or felt? No love was lost between them. Let her do as she was told, or get out. Even Emily would agree to that. Or would she? Even the dustman was a devotee of Emily's. As quietly as if he were a strange cat in his own house, he turned away from the kitchen and its hated inmate and mounted the stairs. Arrived at the bathroom, he paused at the open door, watching for a while Emily bathed in the bright electric light within, as she stood, head thrown back, gargling over the basin. "What's wrong now?" he inquired. "Oh," said Emily, ejecting the mouthwash, "it's this geyser. It takes such an age to heat up. I thought I would have my bath a little earlier than usual." "That, darling, is because you never manage it right," he retorted. "And anyhow, it's better than getting the water scalding hot out of the tap before you can say knife. What I really meant was, not so much the tap as, what's the matter with you?" "Matter?" she echoed, glancing apprehensively over her shoulder. "I didn't say anything was the matter, Aubrey, only I think I shall have to go to bed soon after supper. The same old thing." "As I supposed," said Aubrey. and now her two large, luminous eyes had also suddenly become fixed on his fair pallid features. An ingenuous but searching scrutiny had met a viper-like stare in an instantaneous conflict of questioning. "After dinner, eh?" "What was it you called up to me about the garden just now? You look as white as a ghost. You're not ill, Aubrey." The mask had all but taken to itself the appearance of plaster of Paris. It had set so hard. "That's merely your childish way of getting even, of evasion, my dear, an old dodge," he answered as sweetly as his mouth would let him. "I stumbled, fetching water in the garden, and anyhow, what are we waiting for? Mary, there is never, I say, never, a single meal in this house on the tick. And surely you aren't going to suggest that that has anything to do with the geyser." Emily paused a moment in the act of stooping to put down the kettle and was now screwing in the stopper of the water bottle. She watched her fingers. "The bell rang about 5 minutes ago," she said. "Look here, Emily," Aubrey broke out. "It's not a particle of use your attempting to come down to dinner. You just sham that these aches and pains are of no importance, and so only make them worse. You are to go to bed now, and the janitrix shall bring you up something on a tray, some nice minced chicken, and a cup of cocoa, perhaps." He had listened to this idiotic irony, and his stomach had fallen. "Keep friends," urged an inward voice. Emily paused a second time. She had gradually fallen into the habit, during these last months, of thinking over every answer she was on the point of making to her husband before its terms became irretrievable. "I am very sorry," she said at last, "but isn't that a little inconsistent? There can't be anything seriously wrong. At least, of course there can't. And you have always said that it's best not to pay attention to such things. You have always said, wait for them to make you do so. There was only a little faintness, and, well, just here." But her left hand was already stationed over her breastbone. Almost as if an hourglass hung suspended in the air before his eyes, Aubrey was watching the sands of time as they soundlessly glided away. "First it was aches and pains," he argued. "Now it is a little faintness. These women." "And wasn't it I," he had raised his voice a little, "wasn't it I who at last insisted on your seeing the doctor again? And wasn't it I who insisted on his sounding and 99ing you and flourishing that absurd rubber contraption in his ladylike fingers? Careless devil. And didn't he say that he could find nothing organically wrong? Pah, organically. Good heavens. I had a heart for years, when I was a boy, and was not even taken off football. All that palaver, this vague haze of suggestion, symptoms. They invent complications, phobias, as they call them. It pays." Emily had turned away, pretending still to be drying the dumb rubber mouth of her hot water bottle with a towel. By biting her lips, perhaps, she could better keep her mouth shut. "Of course, I'll go at once, but honestly, there is no need." Aubrey drew back, a little too much for it to have been instinctive, behind the door as she closely passed him by. "I never even uttered the word need," he called after her, and then, on second thoughts, followed her into the bedroom, pausing only a moment to dip his head over the rail of the landing, though he failed to catch a glimpse of the front door. "Oof!" he grumbled. "One could dine off merely the smell of the cooking in this house before tasting a mouthful. That fool!" Emily was already drawing the short curtains over the windows. He watched her face intently as she turned down the sheet of her bed. So slow and laborious was every movement that it might have been a sheet of lead, and at every turn, when she hoped she was unobserved, she glanced back at him. What was really wrong, she was meditating. What was behind all this? When a man is tired and hungry, one has to hold one's tongue. Anyhow, it's best to, however unfair and morose he may be. Yes, hold it like a tactful, vigilant child. The child, thank God, they were never going to have. And this time, like a wicked child, He was complaining, not because there was anything to complain of, but because there was not. She folded the bedspread, lifted the bedclothes, and pushed in the bottle between the sheets. "There now," she said, gingerly smiling round at him. "That's all, but you know, Aubrey, how I hate going to bed. Please don't let there be much on the tray." She suppressed a faint shudder. "I am not really hungry." He hesitated. How the devil was he ever going to get to the point? Somewhere in the far dark of his mind he had heard approaching footsteps, faint as the coming of feet on wool, like a man weightless as a shadow walking in snow. Snow. The fact is, Emily, what is really worrying and fretting you is the conviction that you ought to see a specialist. Then why, whatever apart from fees and humbug that blessed word implies, and it means, of course, having that wretched doctor back again, why don't you say so? I wish to God we had someone we could depend on in this miserable neighborhood. He paused again, watching her. What, Emily, by the way, was the name of that fellow at Ambry? A tall man, stiff as a board, with a nose and spectacles. He seemed to know his business. Emily had sat down. She was stooping as if to draw off her shoe, and at this she fixed her eyes as intently on it as if the thing could speak. "You mean Dr. McLachlan?" "Yes, Dr. McLachlan. That's it. Dr. McLachlan. Just like that. The snuffy Scotchman. You wouldn't, I suppose, like to see him." "But surely—" She paused. "Don't you remember? He sold his practice nearly a year ago and wasn't it to Canada?" "Was it?" Aubrey continued to stare at his face in the looking-glass. Better to get down to brass tacks, to have it out, just in case, and other things too. The dead past cannot always take care of itself, with the future in view. Canada, eh? That's a long way off. You have a remarkable memory for dates, Emily. You never forget. And yet, after all, it would be no great loss. Not now. He may have been clever, but he was a trifle underhanded, don't you think? Even fishy. But his friend. Don't you remember on the river that awful day in August when we sat in the boat under a bridge while the rusty rain dripped on and on into the salad? That seems a devil of a time ago. What was his name?" She hadn't stirred. So that was it. At last. Again, not all omens prove false. "You know his name, Aubrey. You are only pretending. You are stirring up. Why?" Aubrey watched himself laugh in the glass, though silent laughter more closely resembles a grimace. "Of course," he drawled. "I know his name, the Reverend John Fiske. He ought, of course, to have gone into the church. You agree to that. He might have some day become an archdeacon. Gaiters and a laced-up chapeau. In spite of the buns and oranges, it needs strong, silent men. Another anniversary, Emily. You had a very soft spot for him in that rebellious, susceptible heart of yours. Once. It was quite a dare." Emily had at last managed to take off the second shoe and had reached, with a shuddering sigh, for her bedroom slippers. Well, she must go on, she supposed. But what is the use? What is the purpose?" she continued. "Of pretense. Oh, heavens, haven't we had this all out again and again, ages ago? You were talking of doctors. Dr. McLachlan was an excellent doctor." "So it's to be. I'll change for the time being." Aubrey inquired sarcastically. "I didn't say he was not a good doctor. I didn't even say that he was not an excellent doctor. But were you quite satisfied afterwards? I have often wondered, though I don't remember to have mentioned it. But perhaps you hadn't much opportunity for thinking. Too far gone. Stricken." "I refuse to ask or answer any more questions, Aubrey. Why, I mean, you have brought all this up again now. I should not have supposed that just mocking at anyone at a grief like that was But what I am asking now is, did you really have any doubt about Dr. McLachlan? Well, you see, I happen to know Dr. McLachlan myself personally, and he talked the case over with me. Mockery, a quite natural little grievance, and all that aside, I never wanted to dig it up again, but if you must know, he told me himself that he had not really been satisfied, regarding the result of his treatment of the case, I mean, and that then it was too late. Too late? Yes, too late, and really, I didn't care a damn, though, as a matter of fact, I was not so sure myself that I agreed with him. Agreed? My dear Emily, I do wish you would make an effort to get over the habit of just repeating every word one says. It's called cuckooing. It gains time, of course. I say, I didn't agree with him that it was too late. Then did you tell him so? Did you? I want to know that. She bent still lower over her knees. I tell him, said her husband, certainly not. It is not for a mere layman to butt in, though that's what they lie in wait for. Tell me what's the matter with you, then I'll tell you. That's their tack. You mean, she said, rising with a sigh of difficulty to her feet and facing him in the full light of the lamp over the dressing-table, scattered over with its shining glass, cosmetics, and gewgaws, you mean you let it go, that it need not have been fatal, that he himself— Oh, I wish I were dead. She flung her hands apart and gazed steadily back at him. But why do you ask me? Me? Echoed he in quiet derision. Oh, I like that. And which he, may I ask? Why do I ask her about him? That's pretty good. I was right, however, about the soft spot. And, oh yes, I agree that we have discussed all this, or nearly all this, before, and the precise quality of the softness. Nor, Emily, are you by any means the only person in this world who has ever wished herself dead, and in a better world, as they call it. But even from any kind of world some of us may know now, and then relent and come back again, alive-like, if not positively kicking. From the other side, I mean, even to this, a very few. What I am really wanting to know, though, and please do try to be reasonable and calm about it, what I soberly and truly am pining to know is what would you do if, say tomorrow evening, if I happened to meet our friend, not Dr. McLachlan, and I asked him home to supper with us. After what you have said, Aubrey, and you don't seem to see, or even to suspect, how awful it is about knowing and not saying whether or not Dr. McLachlan even suggested that he need not have died, no, I refuse to say anything more. She takes refuge in silence, Aubrey silently protested to the all-highest. And that, he added, is just where, my dear, you are at last on the right tack. So your precious Dr. McLachlan went off to Canada, did he? And if there was anything out of the common, a little mysterious, well, we can't ask him now, can we? No address. In either case. And I say to that, said Emily, that not one of John's friends ever said a word that even suggested that. Anything mysterious, I mean. For heaven's sake, don't keep niggling, said her husband. It's just like a pretty Polly parrot. You will agree, you can't help agreeing, that you only had Dr. McLachlan's word for it. Actually, that his patient had just finally retired, I mean. We omitted attending the funeral, didn't we? You said that I somehow made you lose the train. Charitable. Besides, after all this time, why on earth should you mind so simple a question? Merely if I had happened to meet the afflicted one, say, this afternoon, well, then, good God, he couldn't be dead, could he? Though it might suggest that he was a bit restless. On the other hand, does even an excellent doctor never make mistakes? And especially if he wishes to do not merely one forlorn friend, but two, a little favor. You'll agree with me that that's an ingenious little suggestion, even though I was gracious enough to accept him at his word. There is always that horrid little inquisition about one's having been in one's right mind. Still, a lie is a lie, even if there are grey and commendable ones as well as white. and just a word that would finally put our friend John out of any needlessly unhappy thoughts concerning him, would certainly have been kind, and perhaps even condonable, for both your sakes." Aubrey had ventured further into his own fantastic, pitiless trap than he had intended. His mouth remained ajar, in spite of his intention to shut it, and yet again he found himself listening, though his eyes, reflected in the quicksilver of the glass, continued to watch as Emily came near. She even persuaded herself to lay a hand on his sleeve, to touch him. "You are torturing me. You are beginning again. Well, even if it should be for the last time. It was Dr. McLachlan himself who told me that you went to see him, that you even sat with John that afternoon of the very day before he died. Listen." Her eyes were scrutinizing his face, as though in search of what, until this moment, she could never so much as imagine could be discoverable there, discoverable even there. "Listen," she repeated. "You know that you are hinting at what is absolutely untrue. You know that Dr. McLachlan did his very best, and... Oh, I can't bear it. What has happened? Something has happened, I say. Unless you want to have done with me, you must tell me. You will have to tell me." Oh, Aubrey scarcely more than muttered the words, breathing heavily through distended nostrils. So now we are coming down to the naked facts. Not very pleasant either, so you couldn't bear that little taradiddle even now. Not even the mere hypothesis. Strange, though, it never even occurred to you. Wouldn't it have clinched the... But there, Emily, husbands, after all, will be husbands. You must have realized that long ago. And fisks will be fisks. Fisks. Doesn't that sound just awful? What kind of an animal, do you think, would a fisk resemble? No, I am not questioning the death certificate. I was merely, making up. But just to clear things up a little further, more tidily, let me put it another way. Not, mind you, that mistakes have never been made. Sleeping draughts, that kind of thing. Even wrong identifications, that kind of thing. Bricks instead of bodies. The shockers are full of them. Why, there was a play produced only about a month ago on that very subject. But there, let's drop all that. Supposing, Emily, not what I said just now, but just supposing that he appeared to have come back, I mean, this Fisk of ours. What then? Not himself, of course, you know, but you liked him? Emily had drawn back and had huddled rather than seated herself at the foot of the bed, her hands like a bird's claws clutching its edge. "I see," she replied, though her face at the moment revealed nothing but the mingled glooms and darknesses of doubt and horror. "I see you were only persecuting me. You were putting these vile and awful things into my mind, first merely to watch their effect, and with such gentle fingers, and then to see the effect of taking them out again. And yet—" She added the words almost pensively, as if a voice had whispered a little secret to her, which there was now no immediate need either to explore or to ponder over. "And yet the cruel memory of them remains to fester. No poor wretch, I suppose, forgets his torturers because they restored him to consciousness only in order to begin again. Very well, then, let us be quite clear, and for the last time. You ask me if I liked him. That question, and you know it, and though I detest saying it, came only out of the old malice and cynicism. Liked him? I liked him beyond words to tell. As one likes, being oneself and being happy. As one likes what has remained true and familiar and of one's very being ever since childhood. Also, I loved him. He was the all, the friend that I had never even dreamed of. Yes, have it all out now. There will be no other chance. Also, I was in love with him. Everything that can imply. Body, heart, and soul. And you know that, too. And yet... No, you will never be able to grasp the true meaning of anything so simple. Not a vestige of that is in your nature. Never. Not at any rate until you break yourself on your own miserable rack. And now, because you had the best of it, and what a best, you think you can go on and on, having the best of me, taunting me, mocking me, torturing me, lying and laughing in my face. Who would have believed such lies were even thinkable? Well, now I have owned it, and you can persecute me no more. No, quoth the raven, nevermore. A peculiar leer spread over his sallow face. Ashamed of it? Ashamed? What is there to be ashamed of? What was there to be ashamed of? Have you never even supposed yourself to be in love, not even as a child, before you had the misfortune to meet me? Oh, very, very funny, cried Aubrey, his face wreathed in grimaces. Misfortune, misfortune! He barked it out so loudly in the room that a thin glass ornament on the dressing-table fairly tinkled with amusement. But see here, my pretty romantic bird, what I am saying is, not so much that you were in love with the departed gentleman who, having failed in securing his dot-and-carry one, may have passively accepted his wretched failure and indulged in a sort of go-slow strike against life, but that you still are. Answer me that. And if, living or dead, he came back now, well, are you? Answer me that. The rasp of his half-suffocated voice seemed to corrode the air, and it appeared as if every contour, every line and edge of her face had altered as he looked at her. Every drop of blood seemed to have withdrawn its last faint red from her cheeks. She had even grown thinner and older, and she was bent almost double, crying. Am I? Is that what you ask? The sound of her voice was as toneless and drear as some black stagnant pool fringed with muttering rushes in the flats of a marsh where a lost bird is lamenting what never can be uttered or understood. Well, what if I am? It's not you I am concerned with now. Not even you can divorce one's very soul from its memories. He is dead, and that, for you, is all that matters. All? Indeed, poppet, and yet supposing I say that being dead he yet speaketh. Fair, sleek face, rather long and partially hairless smooth head, glossy as dull brass, Aubrey continued to examine the human creature before him as carefully and coldly as if, ardent naturalist, he had brought down a bird of a rare species and was admiring its plumage. Well, it had always been a relief and refreshment to persecute her, even though this time he had gone far nearer the edge, and that irrevocably, than he had intended. Her misery was a kind of dog-like joy to him, and why not? He was being persecuted himself, for jealousy, even if it is concerned with the despised and valueless, can be a bitter draught, especially if one keeps on secretly sipping at the cup, especially if... Yes, but jealousy, thrown in or not, would he never know whether or not this Mr. Hamilton of his had or had not decided to knock. You see, my dear Emily, he went on, at the very mention, and for God's sake, don't keep on crying, you know how it infuriates me. At the very mention of his name, you let your emotions get the better of you. There's a word for it, hysteria. It's a sort of delayed green sickness, chlorosis. Ask Dr. McLachlan. I don't blame you, though I am not so easy a victim myself to such little aberrations. Not so easy, I say. To be quite truthful, it merely occurred to me to ask the question. You see, you had already been brooding, preening your woes. I have lived with you long enough, oh, how long, to recognize the Aeolian strains. And now a whole year has gone by, yes, to the very day. Surely that should have given you time enough to get really and truly used to things. The words were little more than sluggishly creeping out of his mouth as though he were talking in his sleep. Don't flatter yourself, he went on, that I am seething with any particular emotion, envy, hatred, even uncharitableness, that kind of thing. I don't care a tinker's curse whether you were then or are now in love with him. These women. I don't care, I say. I was never anything more than second thoughts, and then became enemy number one. And yet, darling, I couldn't have let you go. Now, could I? Just headlong to your own ruin. Better the sop of sentimental memories after a year than, Well, an even worse debacle. You have no notion what a canker a heartsick woman can be, nor, darling, had he, and, unfortunate, he left us too early to find out. So be happy with your treasured woes. Why, he looks in on you with every mouthful of bread you eat. He flavors every sip of water. We don't wear empty faces, sigh at nothing, look over our shoulder when there is nobody, nothing there, just for fun. Bless you, no. You can take that from me. But, yet again, supposing there had been love enough, as that pimp of futility ejaculated, it is the cause, my soul, it is the cause. Did you, by any chance, ever read the plays together, and then read no more? Her face slowly turned in his direction, like a snail's groping from its shell in search of its way. It was mottled and distorted with weeping. "I haven't any notion," she said, "what has happened. What horror! Why are you talking like this? What insanity has come over you? All this vileness. It is never only what you say, but the insinuations, the poisonous things underneath the words." A shuddering breath shook her whole body. "Well, then, listen to me. I know that, while we are together, I am at your mercy. We are husband and wife. That was, and that, heaven help me, still is and must be, the end of that. But you have no right, before God or man, to question me like this. Still, here I am, and, as far as I know, in my right mind, and I will be quite candid with you. If only yesterday he had come back and had wanted me, are you listening? Then, whether he was living or dead, I should have refused to see him. Why, you will ask? Because then I was past bearing it. Ours is ours, his is his, and mine is mine. You merely filthed and made vile the most sacred misfortune the heart can suffer and endure. You dragged it through your mud, for your own poor shifty ends. Ends, though not for my choosing, unattainable now. We had said our goodbye for ever, at least for any ever known on earth. And now, well, I take it back. "Take what back?" shouted Aubrey, as if the contempt and fury now writhing on his dead-alive face were also almost past endurance. "Take what back? With your rubber water bottles, and your furry slippers, and your grizzlings, and your grousings. Haven't I a right to speak? Haven't I a word to say? Take what back?" He had this time, as if under the very blackness of the dry frozen forests, wolfishly yelled the question, and suddenly, at sound of it, had been seized with a sort of mental rigor. Good God, came the whisper, had his bodiless enemy actually planned and timed his visit for this? Emily had continued to look at, to watch him. Her dark eyes, stupefied with crying, shining out as if from a mask of bone. "That forever," she managed to whisper. "I take that back. If now I thought he wanted me, I'd—" "No," she cried, pushing up her hands to her face. "I cannot bear very much more. I know now that something awful has happened. What is it? Who is it?" In the pause that followed, a quiet tapping on the panel of the closed door interrupted them. Aubrey wheeled about as abruptly as an animal that has detected in its nocturnal ravagings the snapping of a withered twig. He turned, and by a few inches gently opened the door. "What is it?" he said. He was blankly searching the cold, impassive face beyond it, sharply lit by the lamps of both bedroom and landing. "If you please, sir," said Mary, "Mr. Hamilton has called, and, as you told me, I suppose it is about a picture. He stood there and didn't speak, and after I had inquired, well, I couldn't understand. The mouth moved, but I was not sure if. He seemed to have been waiting in the porch. Perhaps he had knocked before and was listening. But there's, of course, the bell. And, of course, madame, I shut the door. You never know." In spite of her madame, her black eyes were fixed on Aubrey's, wide open and stonily pale blue, while he tried in vain to keep his lips from trembling. It was as if she had accepted his challenge, even though her attention appeared to be elsewhere. He continued to scrutinize that queer facial chart, this human woman's, which, because of its strength of purpose, because of its honesty and integrity perhaps, he had never been able to decipher. Was this merely a trick? Was this merely a vindictive Mare resenting his pretenses? Was anyone there? Was it merely some advertising tout, some ticket seller, an idiotic coincidence? Had he... "As a matter of fact," Mary began again, "I had a feeling that he wished to see not you, sir, but Madame." A remote yet devilish smile, expressing something between fear, astonishment, hatred, relief, and incredulity, was on Aubrey's face as he called back over his shoulder, "Did you hear that, Emily? Someone for you! Someone has come for you!" Then he looked again, but there was no answer. "Thank you, Mary," he managed to mutter at her, but not quite coherently. "You were perfectly right to shut the door. That was no Mr. Hamilton, some wretched whining tramp, perhaps. He may be gone by now. If not, say there is illness. No!" He violently shook his head. "Don't open. Don't open, I say. No good now. It is impossible." He said no more, but slowly shut the door on her, listened for the last rumor of her receding footsteps, and then, with exquisite caution, he carefully turned the key. He switched off the light, tiptoed to the window, and, neatly and punctiliously as a woman, between finger and thumb, drew aside the curtain and looked out and down. Vaguely stirring soundless shadows of trees, shafts of light and of shadow in the small square porch, on the rough red tiles, and nothing besides. Not pausing even to breathe again, he silently pushed the window ajar, leaned out and looked again. No. He pulled the window to, moistened his lips, pushed the hasp home, and drew back the curtains, and this so gently that the metal of curtain ring scarcely sounded on brass rod. Yet again he listened, then stepped back nimbly, and switched on the light again. What she had heard he could not tell. She had fallen sideways along her bed, her face resting between her outstretched arms, as curiously tranquil and composed as if she were already a stranger to all life's longings. "Holy God!" he muttered. Then he called, though almost inaudibly, across to her, "Emily, Emily, what's wrong?" But no effort could as yet persuade him to go near her. Not for him, not for himself then, but an anniversary, to keep an assignation. And Jacob had had to wait 7 years. How fatuous, how preposterous! Breathing so rapidly that a slight giddiness had swept over consciousness, he paused by her motionless body at as great a distance as the wall admitted, stretched out a trembling arm, and lifted the telephone receiver from a small and pretty mahogany table that stood, innocent of any share in the proceedings, on the other side of the bed. With extreme deliberation, as if it were an achievement requiring the utmost skill, he dialed a number. "Is that Dr. Webster's?" he inquired between his lips. "Thank you." He put his left hand over the mouthpiece and tried to control his breathing. "Yes, thank you. This is Mr. Silcott, Mr. Aubrey Silcott. It is you, Dr. Webster?" "Yes, thank you. Could you come?" "Yes, now, at once. I am afraid my wife is seriously ill. Only a fainting fit, perhaps. Some kind of heart attack? I cannot say. We were talking quite as usual. Just home. I'm sorry. I know what that means. But yes, it is rather urgent. Yes, all my thanks." He punctiliously returned the receiver to its slumbers, drew back, tiptoed round the bed, and began to listen again. And in this transfixture, a single commonplace word came sallying nonchalantly up out of his memory, as if it were hurt at its not having been duly noticed before. The word unattainable. Heaven above us! What was not unattainable in this world? But 2 victories, a double event. Rage and despair, like a vortex of wind and rain, swept through his mind. The very bridge of his nose seemed to sharpen, as presently he stooped over the bed at a ridiculous corporeal right angle, and his face assumed a stone-like pallor. Slowly, and with the utmost gingerliness, refusing even to touch her pillow, he pushed down his lips close to the ear of his human companion and called softly, a voice cringing, yet as ferocious as that of a wolf's in the blackness of snow-bound mountains, and as though he had addressed it into the very center of outer darkness, cold, callous, and illimitable. "Emily, Emily, are you there? It's Aubrey. I am in a hell of a mess. Hopeless. What did you mean by unattainable? Unattainable." And again that slowly repeated tapping on the door panel interrupted him. He crossed the room, and with exquisite caution released the catch in the door, holding this firmly a few inches open. "What do you want now?" he asked. "What is going on in there?" said the voice. "Is the doctor coming?" "The doctor?" "Yes, and there hasn't been any knock again from that Mr. Hamilton you said was about." "Oh," he replied, and was compelled, for what seemed yet another infinitesimal yet protracted hole in eternity, to gaze palely back, searching the depths of the motionless, cold eyes that were fixed upon his own, before his tongue could utter another word.